Welcome to the second video in our series on clones, where we'll be recreating Space Invaders. In this video, we'll look over the basics of the game, and we'll go through the preloaded custom rules in the base project that we have provided for you. If you would like to get started with using clones yourself, you may skip this video and jump to video 3, adding more enemies, where we'll look at using the create a clone block and the when object is cloned rule. Okay, let's jump into the basics of Space Invaders and the project we have provided for you. Part 1. The basics of Space Invaders. In Space Invaders, you control a ship that can shoot projectiles at enemies. The enemies move across the screen and down towards you. We will be creating a different version of Space Invaders for the purposes of exploring clones. At the end of this video series, you are very welcome to customize the project to match the original game more closely if you like, or you can remix it to make your own unique interpretation of Space Invaders. Now let's play through the base project, which contains the core mechanics of the game. Press the turquoise plate button in the top right corner of the screen to test out the project. I've used Spacepod as my player ship and Robo as an enemy, but you can substitute them with any objects that you like. You should be able to move the player and fire projectiles by using the emoji buttons. At the moment, pressing the shoot button shoots a single projectile at a time, and shooting at the enemy should destroy it, but we have just one enemy right now. Let's go back into edit mode and take a quick look over the code. You can tap the arrow in the top left corner of the screen to go back into edit mode. Part 2. Recap of the base project. Now let's go through the code in the base project. Just some notes before we start. Feel free to pause and rewind the video whenever you like. You can take a look through the code and change it as well. If you change the code and decide later on that you would like to have the original base project, you can simply start this video again from the Learn tab. So we have emoji buttons to let the player move and shoot. Let's look at the code that controls the movement of the player first. If you would like to learn how to make control pads yourself, we have a video that shows another way of making a control pad. You'll find it under the Learn tab in the Game Components section. For now, we will just have a brief look over the code in this project. Tap on the left button emoji and tap See Code. There is a custom rule called Button Code. Custom rules and custom abilities allow you to reuse code easily. This is because you can drag the custom block wherever you want to use the same code, rather than having to manually drag out the individual blocks again. And whenever you edit the blocks inside the custom block, those blocks will be updated wherever the custom block is used. Custom blocks can also help to tidy up your code by making it collapsible and letting you name them. You can tap on the arrow at the left of the custom rule to expand it and see what is inside. So there are two custom rules inside the button code custom rule. Tap the arrow on the left of the button pressed messaging custom rule to expand it. We can see that when this text object is pressed, it will broadcast a message with its name, followed by a space, and then the word pressed. So in this case, it will broadcast the message left button pressed. Broadcasting messages allows other objects to listen into these messages and then respond in their own code. There is another custom rule called button appearance. Tap on the arrow on the left of this custom rule to expand it. Let's have a look at the rules inside. We can see that these rules describe behavior for how the buttons should look when they are pressed and not pressed. This custom rule will make the button smaller and fainter when it is pressed, and bigger and more visible when it is not pressed. Let's check the code of the right button. Tap on the X in the top left corner to exit the code of the left button. And just tap anywhere on the stage, any spot that's empty, to deselect the left button. Then tap the right button and tap See Code. We can see that it also has the same button code custom rule. When it is pressed, it would broadcast a message similar to what the corresponding left button broadcasts, but it would broadcast the message right button pressed. So essentially, these two buttons broadcast messages when each of them is pressed, that let the player respond and move left and right accordingly. Let's check the code of the player to see how it responds to these messages. Tap on the X in the top left corner to exit the code of the right button. Then tap on the player and tap See Code. If you want to change the look of your player, by the way, you can tap the bubble in the top left. Then you can choose another character, shape, or image. Feel free to pause the video here if you would like to do that. So there is a custom rule called Player Movement. Let's tap on the arrow on the left of the rule to expand it and see what is inside. We can see that the player broadcasts its own messages to itself upon receiving each of the left button and right button pressed messages. It broadcasts the player move left and player move right messages. Let's scroll a bit further down to see what the player does when it receives these messages from itself. So the player changes X accordingly, remembering that changing an object's X position controls its horizontal movement. If you would like the player to move left and right at a different rate, feel free to pause the video here and change the numbers in the Change X blocks. And the player also changes pose. Separating the code into messages like this also allows other objects to trigger the player moving left and right. For example, if you wanted to add more controls such as tilting or another setup for accessibility, you can make use of the same messages to make the player move. This saves you from having to code the same Change X blocks for each new control setup, which would make it harder to update if you wanted to change the movement system and wanted to use another physics system. Again, if you would like to learn more about movement and making your own control pad, you can check out another way of doing it on our control pad video. Let's scroll further down to see the rest of the player's code. Underneath the player movement rule, I also have code to make my player disappear after being hit by the enemy. It uses a destroy block, which we'll look more into in a later video of this series. Let's tap on the X in the top left corner to exit, and take a look at the code for the shoot button. Tap on the shoot button and then tap See Code. Again, it also has the button code custom rule. When you press the shoot button, it broadcasts a message called Shoot Button Pressed. Let's look at the code for the projectile to see how it responds to the shoot button being pressed. Tap on the X in the top left corner to exit the code for the shoot button. Tap on the text object above the player. This is the player projectile. Tap See Code. So the projectile object listens into the shoot button pressed message. We can expand the custom abilities to look inside. Tap the arrow on the left of each of the ability names. So the player projectile appearance ability describes the size and emoji used for the projectile. You can change the emoji and size values as you like. Let's look at the player projectile fire upwards ability. So this makes the projectile go to the player's position, make itself visible, and then move up the height of the screen. It gives the appearance of the projectile having been fired upwards by the player. Let's check out the code of the enemy now. Tap on the X in the top left corner to exit. Then tap on the enemy and tap See Code. You can see a when game starts rule with an enemy movement custom ability inside it. Tap the arrow on the left of the custom ability to look inside. The enemy movement custom ability makes the enemy move across and down the screen. The enemy will keep checking whether it is near the edge of the screen. If it is not near the left or right edges, it will keep moving forward. If it is near the edge, it will move down, change direction, and then move forward so that it is not at the edge anymore. The enemy checks whether it is near the edge of the screen through the code in the check if else block. If its X position is not in the first eighth of the screen's width or the last eighth of the screen's width, the enemy will keep moving forward. Otherwise, it will move down, flip, and then move forward. If you would like the enemy to have different movement behavior, feel free to pause the video here and change the code in the enemy movement custom ability. Scroll further down to see the rest of the enemy's code. Tap the arrow on the left of the last custom rule to expand it. The last custom rule makes the enemy disappear when hit by the player projectile. Again, it uses the destroy block, which we will explore further in a later video. Tap on the X in the top left corner to exit the code of the enemy. We also have an object that draws the background. On the right of the screen, there is a text object. Tap on the object and tap See Code. Tap the arrow on the left of the Draw Background custom rule to expand it. This custom rule draws a dark blue background with some lighter blue spots to mimic stars. The object spawns in random positions across the screen to draw the lighter blue spots. You can edit the code if you would like a different background. Now we have gone over all the objects and existing code in the project, from the player's movement and shooting capabilities to the code of the enemy and of the background. We are ready to expand on the game experience through the use of clones. See you in the next video!